Hi, this is Scott with Ford Tech. Today we're in a Ford Escape and we're going to show you how to install and use our start-stop eliminator for this vehicle. This eliminates the need to push the off button on the dash every time you get in the vehicle. This installation and device is specific to the 13.2-inch equipped vehicles that have the auto start-stop switch here with the audio controls. Let's get started. To install the device, we need to pull out the instrument cluster to plug it in behind the instrument cluster. To access that, first we need to pull the tablet style screen out of the dash. There is a cover plate here that is over the 3 7mm screws. To get the cover plate out, we'll use one of our dash removal tools and pop it out. We put the tool underneath the cover and give it a twist to pop it off. Now we need to remove the 3 7mm screws that are holding the screen in. With those 3 screws out, we're going to lift the screen straight up and then tilt it out. Be sure to protect the screen from rubbing on the dash while you disconnect it. And we got to remove these 2 connectors. The black one has a little release tab right here in the middle on the top. Push that release tab and unplug it. The pink one has a tiny little release tab here on the top. And once you press that release tab in, you'll be able to pull the connector straight out. And then set the screen someplace safe to protect it. Next, we need to remove the 2 7mm screws that are exposed behind the screen that was removed. Each set of screws that are removed are slightly different, so be sure to keep track of where they came out. Once those are removed, this piece of trim that runs all the way across the dash and behind the screen right here needs to unsnap. When we go across here, the piece of trim goes all the way under the passenger side vent. It gets kind of thin there, so you're going to want to use a dash removal tool and get underneath it and work those clips free before removing it to not break the piece of trim. Next, we need to remove this 1 7mm screw here. This screw is the same size as the 2 that just came out. In front of the instrument cluster here is a piece of trim in front of the cluster above the steering wheel, and this unsnaps straight up. There's clips that snap it down in. So to release it, we'll pop those clips out. You can use our plastic dash removal tools or just get underneath with our thumbs. And unsnap that, and then you can kind of slide this down out of the way. This will expose 2 7mm screws way down in here that hold this dash piece on. These screws are kind of long for what they are, so they take a little while to back out because they have a very fine thread on them. I found they're very difficult to get a straight angle on with the nut driver, so you really need to use a socket wrench inside the opening. With those 2 long screws out, we need to remove the trim around the instrument cluster here. It goes over and includes this vent right here. Then we'll set this trim out of the way. Next, we need to remove the 2 7mm screws that were exposed by that trim on the top side of the instrument cluster. we'll take a soft cloth and kind of lay it over the steering column here and pull the cluster forward and tilt it out. You'll see on the back side of the cluster here is a single connector here that needs to get unplugged. This is where our device is going to plug in line. There's a tab right here where my thumb is, and we push in on the tab and then unplug the connector. And then we'll plug in the device from 4D Tech. When we do, you'll see the device will blink momentarily, let you know it made a connection. And then we plug the other end into the back of the instrument cluster. And then this can get tucked back out of the way. Place the cluster back in, and we'll reinstall it. With the cluster back in, we'll reinstall the cluster trim. Carefully slide this over. Get the vent lined up on the driver's side. And down here where these two lower screws go, there's some tabs that align this plastic trim on top of the tabs for the cluster, and that'll line up those lower screw holes. And then we'll take these long fine thread screws and put those back in. Once those two screws are back in, we'll take this piece of trim that is above the steering column, put it back up on top here, align the clips, and snap it back into place. To put the one screw back in on the cluster trim. And then we just need to replace the two screws. And then last, we put the screen back in, reconnecting the black connector and the pink connector. Once that's back in, we just need to replace the 3 7mm screws that hold in the screen. And then just replace the piece of cover trim from the screws. Now that the device is installed, we'll start up the vehicle. When we start up the vehicle, you'll see that the off setting on the switch has automatically been applied by the device. This will be applied every time you start the vehicle now, as long as you leave the switch in the off position. If you want to turn the system back on, simply push the button and the system will be activated and remain activated until you've pressed the button again to memorize the off position. Now you see how to install and use the Start-Stop Eliminator for the Ford Escape from 4D Tech. I'm Scott. Thank you for checking out our video.